35th range, which is like a lot of points, but not enough to be at the top. And you'd expect in the season that one player from that level of the standings was going to suddenly go on a tear and go into contention, and they're all vying to do it here. As our match starts, Todd is on the play by virtue of winning that 1 seed. He starts on a fetch land. Brad gets the first creature into play. That's Noble Hierarch. And we pass back to Todd. So what are your thoughts? What's going on in this matchup? What are we doing? What cards matter?
So you have to imagine that being on the play is very important. All of your land drops matter. You're basically a combo deck playing against another combo deck. Your deck is capable of doing the same thing as your opponent. So being on the play and being able to pay for things like Daze and Spell Pierce pretty easily is very important. And similarly, Brad starts with a Noble Hierarch, whereas Todd does not have one, and that kind of like steals the initiative back.
Noble seems just great in this matchup. I would be really thrilled to have one on turn 1. Todd's first play is a turn 2 Blighted Agent. I like that they both have Tom Ross tokens
dueling
there.
Tom Ross. Does Tom Ross think that this would ever happen?
Well, so you know when you play like Mortal Kombat games where like, you know, when
It's the mirror match?
Yeah, it's after you win all the regular matches, then like the last level is the mirror match. And you get to see like you fight yourself, but you're like a slightly different color.
Yeah.
You know. Brad with a second Noble Hierarch and an Inkmoth Nexus will pass back. I guess it's like, okay, if you had the choice, would you rather have a bunch of pump spells or a bunch of blue spells in this matchup? Like, or just a bunch of creatures?
I think 1 creature and a lot of pump spells.
Okay, so
I want a Glistener Elf and 4 Invigorates.
All right,
that's probably the nut draw.
Big creature, let's go. Let's win quick. Todd is going to go ahead and crop rotate this. He's going to play a forest and immediately crop rotate it. You have to assume it's for an Inkmoth. He already has Pendlehaven.
Yeah, I mean, oh, okay. So I think I understand what Todd's doing. Like, he definitely wants a crop rotation and get the Inkmoth, and he also wants to use Pendlehaven to pump his Blighted Agent. I guess there's also a consideration that maybe he wants to get the Wasteland, but by doing this before he uses Pendlehaven, he gets to play around the Miser's Spell Pierce that Brad has in his deck.
Yeah, and I actually think, it's going to be the one of Wasteland. I was saying, what scares me about Brad's hand right here is the Inkmoth. It says only Infector in play. So he immediately wastes the Inkmoth Nexus. And now Brad without an Infector next turn. His board looks way less scary. Todd goes ahead and pumps up that Blighted Agent, swings in, puts 2 poison onto Brad, and passes back. If you look at Todd's hand, he's got a Daze, an Invigorate, and another land.
Yeah, so currently one of these Dazes is live.
One's live. The Invigorate means that Brad is 2 swings from dead with this Blighted Agent, if he can't interact. And one thing, though, this deck, it can't kill creatures, right? Blighted Agents are just here to stay once they're down.
At least in game 1. I mean, you could use the Berserk to kill your opponent's creature.
Right.
That can be dangerous, because then they can just use a pump spell.
and kill you. So with Berserk works, when I use it on my opponent's creature, can I do it like during their second domain? And just like get it, that way that doesn't happen?
No, you still have to use it during combat, I believe, after blockers are declared, maybe? Something like that. I know that you used to be able to do a damage on the stack, but since that doesn't work anymore, you have to do it still in combat.
Okay, so there's no way to be like after damage Berserk your guy to kill it anymore. So you have to make him go Berserk before he fights, which is really scary in this matchup.
But sometimes you're in that situation and you got to do what you got to do.
Back onto Brad's side, he cast a Ponder for the turn and simply laid another Inkmoth passed back. You see in Brad's hand, it looks like he has the full combo. Looks like he has a Vines of Vastwood and an Invigorate in hand. So if he can get all those off, he needs a lot of mana to do that. He can just 10 Todd. Todd goes ahead and just plays his land, swings Blighted Agent, pumps it for 2. Brad puts 2 more poison on Brad. He's at 4. Todd just draw for the turn was another fetch land. So yeah, he's still sitting on Invigorate, Daze.
Yeah, this is a pretty close game actually, depending on what's in Brad's hand. If he's on if he has Vines and not Invigorate, he might actually be in trouble.
Yeah, he activates Inkmoth and swings. It's going to Exalt twice, which Noble Hierarch is so good in this matchup.
Yeah.
And he's going to give Todd 4 life and Invigorate it. That pumps it up to a 7.
Yeah, Brad's a nice guy,
Yeah, okay. Gains 3. So Todd, gains an irrelevant amount of life. Yeah, it's 3, not 4 on the card. So he does a slight amount of damage. And you see a lot of vines in Brad's hand. I think he has a pair of them, in which case he might just fire one off. But then he doesn't represent as much counterspell. And you see a second Invigorate.
I told you, man, this is the nut draw.
Yep, okay, there you go.
And
that's what you want. You want 4 Invigorates and an Infector. And, well, Brad didn't have 4, but he sure had 2, and that was enough.
Yeah, I mean, if he was forced to just use vines in those games, Todd actually could have caught one of them with Double Daze and then attacked for lethal on the swing back using Pendelhaven, Blighted Agent, and an Invigorate.
Yeah. Well, all the counter spells in this deck, they're all soft permission, right? So
except for Force of Will.
Except for Force of Will, right. So like your Daze and Pierces, they're soft permission, which means if I'm just playing 0 mana pump spells, like you probably just can't fight over them, right? I mean, you probably just have the mana.
Exactly. That's why 4 Invigorates is in the nut draw.
Great. Maybe turn 1 Glistener Elf, turn 2 throws chucks some Invigorates at it.
Maybe 1 gets forced, but then hey, you still have all these. So
yeah. So I guess like the ideal draw would be like turn 1 Glistener Elf, turn 2 Pendelhaven, tap it, 4 Invigorates.
Well,
all right, kill you.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't need that many.
Or 2 Invigorates, sorry,
yeah.
two get you.
So it's like 1 gets Force, 1 gets Spell Pierce maybe, and then you still have 2 left over with the Pendelhaven or something. Yeah.
Sure. So we're bringing you back to the booth right now. Brad Nelson is up a game on Todd Anderson. We're bringing you back once again for trivia. This is 6 months of Star City Games Premium. And we are looking at, what is it? I believe this is a literal 75-card mirror between the 2 players. They worked on this together. This is the blue-green Infect deck. So looking at the deck, we were talking about the permission spells in the deck. He has 3 days, so his counter spells are 3 days, 3 Force of Will, not 4, so just 3 of each, and then 1 other counter spell. So we're looking for a 1 mana counter spell that is in the blue-green Infect deck. If you believe you know the answer, tweet that with the hashtag SCG Premium on it, and you have to do that before the end of the top 4.
I think you should stipulate that it's the one that counters target spell.
Do we have
situationally? Well, there's also a Stifle, which counters an activating ability.
All right, if you're right. Okay.
So,
okay, it is not Stifle. Right, yeah.
So the non-Stifle one.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think when I say counterspell, I never really for some reason, think of Stifle as a counterspell.
Stifle, counterspell is your fetch land. I mean, I just don't want people to be confused. I'm trying to be clear.
Yeah.
You know?
No. You're absolutely right. It does say the word counter on it, and it's blue, and it's a jerk, so it probably qualifies.
Yeah, and it is also a one of.
Okay. All right. But anyway, so yeah, tweet the answer at SCG Premium. At the end of the round, we'll give away 6 months. Going to the sideboard, though, okay, a 75-card mirror. There's no tricks. No, it's all about, like, what do you think of the matchup? All right. Submerge looks great.
Submerge does look great.
Okay, it costs 0. It's like the best kind of thing we can do here. What else do you want? Like, Nature's Claim hits an Ink Moth. That's not terrible.
Spellskite looks pretty good.
Spellskite looks fantastic, huh? It steals all the pump spells.
Yeah, I think Sylvan Library might be okay, just because your life is actually pretty much a free roll in this matchup.
It's interesting. So the one thing is, how much time do you think, like, if I were to play 20 games of this mirror match, right, how many turns do you think the average game goes to here?
5. So like, not average, I guess. Average might be 4.
Like
3.7.
3 point something?
Yeah.
Which is like, if your average game is ending on like turn 3 or 4, like, do you have time for Sylvan Library?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so, especially if you're on the play, just because for the most part, you have to be dancing around what your opponent could possibly do, and the fact that Submerge exists and is a free removal spell, Force of Will also exists. You could also use things like Vines of the Vastwood to counter your opponent's pump spell on their own creature.
Yeah. Do you want them to last Force of Will in here? It's like, it seems like you want everything that's free.
I'm not sure, honestly.
Yeah, it's normally in these kind of matchups, you wouldn't want it. I don't know. It seems like free spells just seemed really good in this match.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I guess you probably want it. It's difficult to say when the blue card count is not very high.
Yeah, the Force of Wills are not ideal in this deck. It is a hard counter, though, and as we saw before, Todd had a bunch of soft permission that just didn't matter that game. You know, Force of Will really would have mixed stuff up.
It would have, but I mean, Brad just ended up having so many pump spells that I don't think there was really anything that Todd could have had. But I definitely think that having access to the 4th copy of Force of Will makes the presence of Sylvan Library that much better.
All right, so we have Spellskite, Sylvan Library, Submerge.
4th Force of Will, and probably a Nature's Claim. Probably not the Crossing Grips, just because they're a little too expensive.
And I'm going to go back. This is a little bit of a different sideboard than Tom Ross has played. When Tom Ross has played the deck, he always has a pair of Necropedes in the sideboard,
Yeah.
wanting to up its infect creature count. I kind of just want to get your opinion, like, okay, what kind of matchups like are Necropede matchups for the deck? It seemed always like it's odd that the creatures were in the sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, there are some matchups where your opponents are overloading on removal, and in that case, having just an extra infector is kind of nice. But also, he had it in there for a very specific reason, or some very specific reasons, like, oh, if I play against Shardless Bug and I have this Necropede, like, it can kill 2 Baleful Strixes.
Okay, and that makes it better than, say, Ichor Claw Mirror, which is your other
I think
possible infector.
I think so. Ichor Claw Mirror is pretty nice on its own with Berserk.
Yeah. If they block it, they just pay a huge price. Anyway, we are underway. Game 2, Todd Anderson on the play. He had to mull to 6 this time, but unlike last game, he gets to start on a Noble Hierarch. Brad, though, not to be outclassed, has a Hierarch of his own. And Todd, stoic-faced, swings Noble Hierarch. Brad thinks about it, but he opts to take one.
Yeah, not surprising there. And I'm not sure if I would describe Todd's face as stoic. He was just kind of like, yeah, this is what this game is about. For me, at least. I'm attacking with Noble Hierarch.
Right. Brainstorm for Brad. He played a fetch land for the turn as well. Todd's going to go ahead and Spell Pierce it. Brad can crack the fetch land and pay mana.
No, he's Force-a-Willing.
Oh, he is Force-a-Willing to Brainstorm. That is a bold move.
That's very aggressive.
So, all right, the idea behind this, if I have it right, is that he's already down 2 cards. He's on the, he was on the play. He had to mulligan. If Brad can set up his hand perfectly, Todd just will feel even farther behind.
Right, and that's the thing, right? It's like, okay, well, now you're down to a couple bump spells, but what if I let him Brainstorm? What are my odds of winning? He can probably beat me through a Force-a-Will.
Right. Like, maybe Brad's hand's terrible and needs this Brainstorm to do anything.
Yeah, and he has the mana to pay for Daze. He has the mana to pay for Spell Pierce, which Todd had. So, do you think that you're going to get Force-a-Willed?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Todd played Inkmoth for the turn. If you look at Todd's hand, it looks like he just might return the favor that Brad paid him last game. He has Vines and Invigorate. With that Noble Hierarch in play, that is enough to, well, 10 Brad next turn.
Yeah.
Brad's hand, though, is not, as we said before, maybe if it's nothing, maybe countering that Brainstorm turns it all off, but that is not the case. Brad has, looks like at least 1 Force-a-Will, if not more, and has another Brainstorm if he wishes to replace the other one. Also for the turn, he played his own Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah, which can always just block.
Yeah, it can block. Even though it dies, it'll put a -1/-1 counter on Todd's Inkmoth. Infect creatures are real fun when they fight each other because they always just trade.
Yeah.
Pump spells are really bad. I remember that from Limited. If we were both playing Infect, my combat tricks all got really bad.
Yeah, your pump spells are good if your creatures had evasion, right? Because maybe you could use like the XG pump spell to get in for lethal or whatever.
Untamed Might would kill it would kill players real well, but it wasn't great in combat.
Right.
And we will see. So going on to Todd's turn, Todd activates Inkmoth and swings. Brad's going to make the play, activate Inkmoth. Looks like he's going to block. Seems reasonable here, right? Brad has so many more cards that 1-for-1 trading is fine by him. And Todd made the block. There is a -1/-1 counter on Inkmoth, but because it was exalted, it didn't die here. It doesn't mean that Todd can keep the Inkmoth around as a mana source, but he can't ever activate that guy.
Yep.
Well, he can, but he wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, you can have -1/-1 counters on things that are not creatures. It was a creature when it got one, and if it ever becomes a creature again, the counter will still be there. But because it is not a creature right now, it is just a land that happens to have a rather strange counter on it.
Yeah, a lot of the time you might see that with something like Treetop Village getting a Spike Feeder counter, assuming it's, the year 2002.
Yeah. That was a thing that, you could do that play.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, next turn Treetop's crashing in as a 4/4. -1/-1 counter on a land. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't too many things that do -1/-1 counters up until we returned to Mirrodin.
Yeah.
We saw cards here and there, some Serrated Arrows style cards. If you want to go,
sure.
I'm going to go even older than 2002 then.
No, I mean, that card was time shifted, so.
Okay. But it wasn't like if we're going to go back to like tournament decks and plays that happened, right?
Right.
Okay. Brad's going to go ahead and Brainstorm here, cracking a fetch. So now that he's made a trade, he wants to reload his hand. Seems like a reasonable spot to be for Brad. Todd did play a Glistener Elf on his turn, so he has another Infector he can attack with.
Yeah, I think Brad just needs to get something going, some sort of threat.
Yeah, I mean, ideally he wants to just like trade some Infectors with Todd's Infectors and then be the last man standing. If you look at Brad's hand, though, I'm not sure he has another Infect creature in it. He does have a Spellskite, which
and that's going to be very important.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It can even just like take a Glistener elf hit if it wants to. And yeah, Spellskite seems excellent in this matchup.
Yes.
Brad with Pendelhaven. And he does have an Infector. It's Blighted Agent.
Okay, well, that's a good start. That's basically what you need.
Do you think it trades with the Glistener Elf? I think Brad may have a Submerge.
So this play is really interesting from Brad's side, where he has the Submerge and the Spellskite. He could play the Spellskite, but then that means that Todd is never going to go for it, right? Because he has these pump spells that he can't really use. So by not playing the Spellskite, Brad is actually inducing Todd to using his pump spells.
Yeah, Brad feels pretty confident here with, I believe, Force of Will and Submerge. He wants Todd to spend pump spells.
I believe it's the Flusterstorm.
Okay, and that one is out of
the sideboard.
The sideboard, okay. Yeah, and I mean, I guess you could have run out Spellskite there. Then maybe you could have gotten Dazed, and you really just don't want to turn on a Daze at any point anymore. We'll see. Todd swings with Glistener Elf. It is a 2/2 thanks to Exalted. And it looks like no blocks on Brad's side, and Todd's going to go ahead and Vines it.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that Brad blocked it's hard to imagine that Brad has not gone to blockers yet if Todd was willing to use the Vines.
And this is like just where we're seeing where like the table presence that Brad Nelson has. I mean, it's hard to describe, right? Because you kind of have to sit down and play him in a match to get it. But like, it's just like plays like that. He's like, I really want you to swing and use a pump spell right now so I can submerge you. And like, if that happens in the other order, right? If Brad tries to submerge, then Todd Vines is in response, and then Todd wins this fight.
Yeah, that's catastrophic.
Right. But Brad just like, he gets everything to play out how he wanted to here. You know, Todd went for the Vines, Brad submerged the Glistener Elf to the top of the deck, and now Brad just seems even farther ahead.
Yeah, and I really don't think that exchange happens if Brad just runs out the Spellskite. And then he also had Flusterstorm for backup.
Yeah, and that's like an interesting understanding. So, and this is something that Brad Nelson, like I said, he, at least in watching him and playing with him, he does really well, is you can take like the, on paper, like, okay, this is the highest percentage play, this is the maximum best line, but like, he plays sort of opportunities of like, hey, if I play this other line that's not the common line, but is acceptable, I think I can induce I can make a board state where my opponent will mess up in way X or Y, or will do something that I want. Like, I don't know, I really like how he does stuff like that in matches.
I definitely agree, and it's like, that stuff doesn't always work out, right? But when it doesn't, you're not really losing a lot of percentage points, and when it does, you basically blow your opponent out.
Yeah. I remember talking with Brad when he was playing Cobblade about how he would cast Quadrant Hawk and just get 2 Hawks instead of 3, just to try to be like, I'm going to get my opponent to think I had 2 Hawks in my hand already, so I could only get 2, and then later on, I'm going to play a card that I couldn't have if I'd had the second Hawk, and I'll get them. Because it doesn't matter, because I'll just find the Hawk later if I need it.
Right. I mean, that's kind of deep, because there were a lot of games where like I would search up all 3 Hawks and just discard one because I didn't want to risk drawing the 4th one.
Yeah. All right, back on our board, Spellskite has hit the table for Brad, but in other news, Todd casts his own Spellskite. So we have Glistener Elf swinging here for Brad and Inkmoth swinging for Todd. It's right now the race favors Brad. Brad has 2 poison on him, Todd has 6. So Todd's gonna need some help, but he does have an Invigorate here, so we have a game.
Well,
kind of.
I mean, both players have Spellskites.
Yeah, you have to kill it. Right?
It's kind of weird what happens.
Well, all your pump spells become awful.
Yeah.
That's step 1. Noble Hierarchs become sweet. Those things are good.
Sure. I mean, it's like, do you start trying to swing for normal damage, maybe, if you're Todd? Is it more likely that you get to kill him with normal damage at this point?
Well, you see he found a Noble Hierarch there. It is just a little late for Noble. It would mean his Inkmoth would hit for 3, whereas Brad's Blade Agent hits for 2. And if Todd were not already behind in the race, I think that'd be a great thing to do.
Yeah.
As it is, it looks like Todd's going to have to draw to something like Submerge or Nature's Claim just to get the Spellskite and then go from there.
Yeah, I guess, you know, the normal damage play doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, Brad also has an Inkmoth to block Todd's Inkmoth, so there are a lot of things in Todd's way right now. And I think it's fair to say that, like, the creature I want in the mirror is Blighted Agent. I think that's, like, better than Inkmoths here, just because, you know, Brad has one, like, Todd can't get rid of it, right? He can't kill it. Like, his only way is to submerge it and counter it on the way back down.
Right. Or race it. That's certainly a fine solution, too.
Yeah, but if when you're behind in the race right now, and Brad has Blighted Agent, like,
yeah,
things feel bleak.
How do you catch back up?
Yeah. You see Brad here on his turn. He's going to Brainstorm. There is a Berserk available to him.
And he has the other Noble Hierarch, so this is threatening lethal.
And there we have it. Brad Nelson, 2-0 defeats Todd Anderson in the Infect Mirror, dealing Todd his first loss of the day. Todd was 8-0-1 through the Swiss. Brad, so far, 4-0 in Infect Mirrors, beating Matthew Webster 2-0, Todd Anderson 2-0 as well. And I've said it before, but I'm thinking, like, Brad is not the person I would want to play in this mirror match, just based on how this deck plays.